Mr. Ambassador, it's a real honor to have you visit our class at Rockford University this afternoon. Let me just take the next hour and a half to introduce you. I had the opportunity.
You're done? You're going to kind of cut it short?
Yes.
Okay, good.
The Ambassador Hoekstra and I were elected at the same time in November of 1993 to the 103rd Congress of the U.S. House of Representatives. He and I were the first persons to meet each other because right after the election, Frida and I drove up to Michigan and actually had dinner with Peter and his wife. Ambassador Hoekstra served in the House for 8 terms, and then he left the House of Representatives. He is now the U.S. Ambassador to the Netherlands. And prior to that, I think at the time he was elected, he was the only publicly listed company executive to be elected to Congress at that time. So bringing a lot of experience from helping to run a major corporation, and 18 years in Congress. Now he's the U.S. Ambassador to the Netherlands. And Ambassador, it's a real joy to have you with us.
Hey, great. Thank you, Don. It's great to be with you. And you want me just to get kind of started and lead into what ultimately will be an extended period of questions and comments?
Sure.
Okay. Good. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the intersection of foreign policy and the intelligence committee or the intelligence community. I had the opportunity to spend 10 years serving on the intelligence committee, and I spent about 6.5 years as either the chairman of the committee or the ranking Republican, meaning I was in the minority. All right, but so I was the lead Republican on the committee for about 6.5 years. I got on the committee in January of 2001. I was going to be doing some, just go see the world. It was a time of peace and prosperity in America. The 90s had seen the collapse of the former Soviet Union, and everybody thought, the world is a great place. 9 months later, we had 9/11, and all of a sudden, from spending a part of my day working on intelligence committee issues, I ended up spending about 95% of my time in Washington working on those kinds of issues. 3.5 years later, the chairman of the committee went on to become the director of the CIA. It created an opening. Another, congressman from Illinois, Speaker Dennis Hastert, at that time appointed me to become the new chairman of the Intelligence Committee. So what's the intersection of the intelligence community and the Foreign Service, State Department? The first thing is you have to recognize that the intelligence community, all 16 different agencies, and then the Director of National Intelligence, which oversees those 16 agencies and kind of sets the tone for the intelligence community. The intelligence community is a service organization. It is their job most of the time to provide the information, the intelligence, the analysis to inform policymakers as to what's going on in the world, and then the policymakers take that information to shape their public policy. At certain times, the community also becomes operational, carrying out certain types of activities to make sure that America keeps safe. But the most important thing to recognize is the intelligence community is a gatherer and an analyzer of intelligence, of information. They then inform the executive branch, they inform the president, and
Oh boy. We lost the voice. Ron, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can hear you now.
Okay. All right. The
last we remember you're saying is that the Intelligence Committee was a gatherer and sifter of information to give to the
That's
executive
right.
branch.
Okay, so they are, they're the gatherer of information. They do the analysis of the information. They then present it to the Congress. They present it to the executive branch. They present it to the policymakers to help us make more informed decisions. What do I experience here now as an ambassador working with the intelligence professionals that are present at the embassy? You may ask, why are they in the Netherlands? I thought the Netherlands was an ally, and they are. So the first thing that they do is they gather information, although we do not target people in the Netherlands. That's our agreement with the Dutch. We are not intelligence gatherers on other countries here in the Netherlands. What we are is we have a partnership, a very close partnership with the Dutch. So their intelligence agencies, they have two. They have one similar to our CIA, and then they also have military intelligence. We coordinate and we work very, very closely with them to work joint targets, to collaborate in those types of things. The second thing that we do, we may inform them of other activities that we become aware of or other information that we gather around the world. When you're talking about the U.S. intelligence community, we have the greatest reach in the world to gather information from around the world. And sometimes that information has a direct and immediate impact or an immediate value to our host here, the Netherlands. And so then we will share information with them that will help maintain their security and their safety right here in the Netherlands. So we collaborate, we share intelligence, and so the intelligence community really helps strengthen what is already a strong bilateral relationship between our two countries. I saw you guys had a lot of questions about the intelligence community and those types of things, and I think that those will probably be best addressed through when you start answering questions. But throughout that whole framework, it's important to realize a service organization helping to inform U.S. policymakers on what to make better informed policy decisions. And then they are an asset overseas working with our allies to strengthen the bilateral relationships between our two countries. And I can tell you that here in the Netherlands, that's exactly how it works.
Ron, go ahead and ask the ambassador the questions on that field.
What's that?
Ambassador Hoekstra, this is Dr. Lee. I'm co-teaching this course with Don Manzullo. It's a great privilege to have you here. I'm wondering, as an ambassador, do you weigh in on what kind of intelligence or information to share with the country you're serving in?
Yes, absolutely. I meet at least weekly with the intelligence community professionals that we have here. I get a focus specifically on anything that may deal with the Netherlands. I get a focus on issues that may be of great interest to both countries, including, right now, what's one of the things that, the Dutch and the U.S. are very interested in. We're very interested in China. So if we've gathered information or intelligence dealing with China, what their activities may be in Europe or whatever, I may weigh in and say, I really think it's important that that information is shared with our Dutch counterparts. And if they haven't already thought of that, they'll say, okay, hey, we'll check back with Washington and see if we can get clearance to share that information. But our intelligence folks are meeting with Dutch intelligence folks pretty regularly, and we have the kind of relationship that most of this information, our intelligence professionals, they just go and they'll share it with the Dutch, without me directing it or whatever. You may be familiar with, well, probably maybe some of your listeners are not, the other people who are viewing this, but we have a Five Eyes relationship. This is the United States, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. We coordinate all of our intelligence and we share our intelligence with each other. So that's Five Eyes. Sometimes we just kind of refer to the Dutch as 5.5 eyes. They're just about there, but they're not as close as some of these other folks, but they are very, very close. And so, I can't think of, intelligence that we've held back from them. Sometimes we may not share sources and methods, but we are very, very open in sharing intelligence with the Dutch.
Mhm. What would you say, you talked about the size and complexity of the intelligence community. What would you say are some of the challenges given that size and complexity to the effectiveness of the intelligence community for the purposes that you outlined?
Well, this came out of 9/11. I served on, when I was in Congress, we did a lot of review of exactly what happened on 9/11. How did those events, get through without our intelligence community ever, picking up on some of the clues and some of the signals that might have enabled us to respond and stop the attacks on 9/11. And what we found at that point in time is, every time something like this happens in government, you come up with, a new words or phrases to describe. It's the whole silo mentality that the National Security Agency doesn't communicate with the CIA, which doesn't coordinate with the Defense Intelligence Agency, which doesn't coordinate with the intelligence professionals that we have in the State Department. So coordination and collaboration is one. The second that so in terms of sharing information and sharing and then enabling us to target and to move on, saying, hey, this organization picked up this information, they transfer it over there so that someone else can follow up who might be able to get more in depth on that. The second is just resources. Intelligence, stealing information is expensive. It's not, it's not cheap. And so what you need to do is you want to make sure that the resources that are given to the intelligence community are that the effort to build the community is a collaborative effort, so that you're not duplicating efforts and those kinds of things. The third thing, that it's not about the complexity, because the first 2 points I would say it's hard to bring these groups together, and the third point is that I worry about, and that that Congress is worried about, is groupthink. Is that once this happened in Iraq, where the intelligence community kind of got it into their mainline thinking that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and so all of a sudden it was every agency, whatever came out of Iraq seemed to validate the thinking, or they reviewed the information with the bias that said Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. And so, that goes counter to the first two, but that's the other thing that we always worried about, was just getting groupthink, and that sometimes they just started heading in one direction, and then they didn't branch off to take a look at certain other leads that might come up that might have also then led them to come to a different conclusion.
Right. There were several reports made as a result of what happened in Iraq. The last one I think they called the Joint Commission. People from all over the world were involved in it, and pretty much of an indictment of the intelligence community on not getting this information straight. From what I can understand, is the same information was given to many intelligence agencies, and that was shared. But essentially, it was coming from just a handful of sources. And so, how would that be a correct conclusion, Ambassador?
I think I think your analysis is, in hindsight, in Iraq, we were presenting information analysis that we didn't have enough collaboration on them. That this stuff was being validated by multiple sources, or it was actually being validated very close to where these things were happening. That it might have been relying on second or third-hand reporting, and then parts of the community would be repeating it to each other. And so, no, I mean, there were lots of things that went wrong in the pre 9/11 that led to the drastic failures that we had on 9/11, and that is why in 2004, think about it, in an election year, we actually reformed the intelligence community. Think about that. I was chairman of that conference committee. So I'm a conservative Republican from Michigan. We had Jane Harmon, who's a dear friend, but she was a liberal congresswoman from Los Angeles. We had Joe Lieberman as one of the Senate conferees. He was, he's the independent. And then we had Susan Collins, who was a moderate Republican, from Maine. And the four of us, we were the four key negotiators, in the middle of an election year in the fall of 2004. And you would say, put four people like that in a room and, who knows what's going to come out, but it's not going to be legislation. But we actually wrote the legislation and got it passed by, pretty significant bipartisan majorities in the House and the Senate. And that legislation is what created the Director of National Intelligence to kind of go after some of these issues.
How would you say or explain the kind of the restructuring of the intelligence community after 9/11, and what assurance can we have that maybe the kind of failure of intelligence we saw in Iraq doesn't happen again?
Well, there's no guarantee on that. But what we did do is we put a national director of intelligence. We put the director of national intelligence in place, it was interesting. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what we should call it. Should it be a national intelligence director, a NID? And everybody said, no, that doesn't sound very good. So we came up with DNI, Director of National Intelligence. But so this thing has morphed into something I think that most of us believe is much larger than what we intended it to be. But this was, the function was going to be coordination and collaboration throughout the intelligence community. All the budgets would at least be reviewed by the DNI office, so there wouldn't be overlap. They would have the latitude, to go to Congress and say, maybe you need to increase funding for technology, to use technology to gain information. Maybe you need to beef up our human resources. Maybe you need to do something. So that, the Director of National Intelligence now has the responsibility for setting the tone and the direction and the collection methods and priorities for the community. That was a big assist. That didn't exist. That did not exist before. The second thing that we did is we created some, focus groups within the national, within the Director of National Intelligence. So on terrorism and those kinds of things. Probably have one now on cyber. I'm not sure if they do, but emerging threats. so that there would be a focused effort within the intelligence community to bring together all of the resources on an emerging threat. Cyber is probably one of the biggest ones that is out there today. So you have that. And then the other thing that we wanted the Director of National Intelligence to do is we wanted the Director of National Intelligence to do more red teaming. So if the consensus of the intelligence community, what would have happened in 2003, 2002, 2003 with Saddam, if the consensus of the intelligence community was Saddam Hussein has, weapons of mass destruction, that at that point in time, the Director of National Intelligence, what they would do is they would appoint a red team. And the responsibility of the red team would be to make as good of a case that they could that Iraq does not have weapons of mass destruction. So they would go through all the data and say, you're reading and you're going through all of this, and Saddam is saying, what we found afterwards, Saddam was saying he didn't have weapons of mass. Saddam was saying he had weapons of mass destruction. He was doing lots of things to reinforce that belief. What we found out afterwards is Saddam was saying that and making it look like he had weapons of mass destruction because he never believed that the United States would ever attack him. And the second thing was that we weren't his audience. So he wasn't worried about the US because he never thought we'd attack. His audience was Iran. And he wanted Iran to believe that he had a strong weapons of mass destruction program so that they wouldn't attack him again. And, a red team might have come up with that hypothesis and forced all of us to take a different look at it. But the bottom line, and Don, you were there when we were considering this, everything and everyone basically that we talked to from the intelligence community said, hey, he's got him. He's got him.
Well,
so
that's because
to the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, whatever, they were all at the same place. And we never had this red team. So those are some of the kinds of things that have come out of the Director of National Intelligence and Intelligence Reform.
But an additional problem in collecting intelligence on Iraq is the fact that Saddam Hussein threw out the nuclear weapons inspectors. He refused to let them come to different sites. He gave every impression that he had WMD, but as you said, the purpose was to put on a show for Iran, thinking that the U.S. would never get involved.
Yep. Oh, no, that's right. Yep.
But the second point is that it wasn't just WMD, it was the statement or the so-called findings that were never materialized that Al-Qaeda was present in Iraq.
Yeah, no, there was lots of missed opportunities to, this is one of the key responsibilities of Congress, is to do the diligent oversight. And, you can make a pretty good argument that in, the 1990s and going into, the early 2000s is that Congress did not do a diligent enough effort to conduct the oversight of the intelligence community that would have shown that in certain parts of the world, we really didn't have the resources to go in and gather the information that would have been critical for making these kinds of decisions. We didn't have the technical assets. We didn't have the human resources to go in and these kinds of things. And at that point in time, the intelligence community had downgraded the role of human intelligence, what we call human, and really was relying much more on signals intelligence, SIGINT. The stuff that you just grab out of the air, it's low risk and all of those kinds of things, but it's not as reliable. And human intelligence gets much more into the plans and intentions if you know the people, or if you have people close to the known players who are sharing information with you. We didn't have those kinds of things.
Well, one of the problems that Congress had, and you should know this better than anybody is that any details about any type of a serious threat are only shared with 8 members of Congress, 4 in the House and 4 in the Senate, including you as the
Right.
chairman of the Intelligence Committee, which is fine because Congress is a sieve. You can't, there's no such thing. I mean, I used to go to these briefings, these intelligence briefings, and I would read more in the Washington Times and Washington Post than I would learn during those briefings. And I remember the first time we had a briefing that was actually in the Republican conference. Somebody got up and said, "You got to be kidding us." A lot more informal situation, but members of Congress, most of them have, Pete, really no clue as to what goes on in intelligence out of necessity.
Yeah. The good thing on this is, you're right. There was a gang of 8. Actually, it's a gang of 9 because there's 5 of us in the House that get the information. The Speaker, the majority and minority leaders of the House, and then the chair and the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, and then the same on the Senate, the majority leader, minority leader, and then the chair and ranking member of the Senate Intel. But the Speaker kind of, becomes the 9th, but they call it the Gang of 8. So you're right, because we're dealing with this pretty much on a daily basis. But the information that the Gang of 8 gets, we probably got information twice a year that was not shared with the full committee. And I'm sure that's exactly what happened when they got bin Laden. That they had a meeting with the Gang of 8. They got briefed by the Director of National Intelligence, maybe the President's National Security Advisor, and they were told, we've identified where we think bin Laden is with a 90-95% probability. We could always be wrong, but we think this is where he is. We're planning on taking this kind of action. And at that point in time, you leave the room, or before you leave the room, you're probably, at least most of the time that I was there, you're asked the question, are you okay with that? And by leaving, if you're not objecting, it means, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with what you're planning. And, and then nobody else knows the details until, the activity is actually carried out. And there are still things that I look back on that I was briefed on that I don't think have ever made it into the public domain. The activity has, but America's role in that activity has never been made public. And it's kind of like, well, at least the Gang of 8 could keep some secrets back then.
Ambassador, I know Congressman Manzullo has some business-related questions, but I wanted to ask you, what would you say to a young person who might be interested in pursuing a career in the intelligence community, or for that matter, Congress?
I'd say go for it. Follow your love. All right. When I was on the Intelligence Committee, I had the opportunity to travel to 84 different countries, and most of them are countries where you'd say, and hey, I had to get reelected every 2 years, but these were not the countries where my constituents would look at them and say, "Oh, wow, nice, Pete. Look at you spent a couple of days on the coast in France. You spent a couple of days in Germany, Luxembourg." The Netherlands and all of that, nice trips. They kind of look at, whoa, you went to Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, you went to Libya, and they would look at it and say, we're glad you're going to these places because we don't really care to go. I traveled to Iraq 10 different times. I went to Afghanistan. But what your answer? I saw the world and I learned so much. And of course, most of the places I went to, I was only there a couple of days. So I'm not an expert in any of those countries, but I know more about them than what I did before I got there. And so, and then I'd meet these terrific young people serving in the intelligence community, serving in the foreign service, or in law enforcement, serving overseas. And, if someone had asked me, hey, Pete, what would you tell your kids if they asked about going in and serving overseas? I'd say, hey, I'd encourage them to do it. They would learn, it'd be a wonderful learning experience. They would learn things that only few people in America ever get to experience. And they could do their time in government service. And with the knowledge that they come back with, they could find a great job in the private sector. They could find a nice job in academia or whatever, and share those experiences with the next generation of people that we're training to go into those kinds of jobs. But you have to have a passion for it. It's tough. We're going through it this year with COVID. All right. The Netherlands is a fantastic place, but basically, the 150 Americans and their families that are present here in the Netherlands, most of us have not left the Netherlands for the last 8-9 months. I've not been out of the country since the first week of February, and this is a small country. It's about 2.5 times the size of my old congressional district. But we've made the best of it. But we haven't seen family members. These folks that I work with are obviously much younger than I have. They haven't been able to go home and see their parents. Their kids haven't been able to see their grandparents. There's uncertainty about when they're going to move on to their next post and those kinds of things. But all in all, it's a very, very good job where you learn a lot.
How does a young person contact? I mean, there are 18 different intelligence agencies. Is there a portal through which they can apply, or how does that work? Or are you aware?
They can go to, I would guess they can go to a CIA website. They can go to, Defense Intelligence Agency. They would come, they would go into the military, and then eventually they'd branch off into that field. If you're coming into the State Department, you can move into that area. But I'm sure all of these agencies have portals, which will say, hey, we're hiring. This is what we're looking for. You go to the NSA, the folks that have all of these great snooping capabilities in the new technology that's out there, and it's like, hey, we're just looking for some of the smartest people in the world to come work with us and help us steal secrets. That's a simple job description. But they can go to these agencies and some places directly apply. State Department, they take the Foreign Service exam. So they're and the jobs are very competitive, which is why, you're competing against some of the best people coming out of school in the United States for these kinds of jobs. And I can tell it with the people that I work with. They're very, very intelligent.
Appreciate that, Ambassador. I'd like to move the conversation to the business end of it. And the first question is, what does the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands do with regard to companies in the U.S. that are interested in forming partnerships with Dutch companies or in selling American products to the Dutch or to the rest of the EU?
Yeah, well, the Dutch are like the fourth largest foreign direct investor into the United States. Small little country, 17 million people, but they've got a lot of money. And so, one of our jobs here is to attract Dutch investment into the United States. And, a whole history of, you could say ambassadors, but most likely a whole history of, strong business relationships between the Netherlands and the United States has resulted in the Dutch being in this position where they've got so much investment in the United States. Dutch investment in the United States leads directly to about 850,000 American jobs. And this goes on at every activity. The Prime Minister of the Netherlands in the summer of 2018 visited Washington. The economic relationship was discussed between the president and the Prime Minister, Mark Rutte. The Prime Minister said that they would work with the United States, they would work with the administration in trying to increase foreign direct investment in the United States so that the Dutch could actually claim that they were supporting 1 million American jobs. It's also then carried out further by the Commerce Department. The Commerce Department runs a program every year called Select USA. It's a conference in Washington that runs for about 4 days, where basically, the Commerce Department presents the program as why doing business in the United States is a good idea. And then most of the 50 states will set up booths. So it's kind of like a trade show where the people who are coming from the Netherlands who are thinking they've got a product or a service that might be viable in the United States can go around and talk to economic development folks from probably 40 states, if not more, to find out if there's a good match for the product and the service that they're looking at offering in a particular state. Here, when people call, the U.S. will set them up with the Commerce Department. We have a Foreign Commercial Services Department in the embassy that will help make those connections for Dutch businesses looking to go into the U.S. And then on the flip side, we're not necessarily really promoting U.S. companies to come and do foreign direct investment here in the Netherlands, but we'll help them absolutely because you can't always be viewed as going into the Dutch and saying, hey, who's going to go to America? And they say, Pete, you're just a taker. All you want to do is take our money and get it flowing to the United States. But right now we're working with a company with someone that you and I served with in Congress contacted me and said, hey, Pete, we're looking at taking this facility. We have a facility in the U.S. We're looking at building almost a duplicate facility in Europe because we think that there's a market for the product that we have. It has a short shelf life. So we think, we need to produce it in Europe. We're looking at the Netherlands. We're looking at 2 other countries. Hey, can you help us? What do you tell us about what it's like to do business in the Netherlands? Tell us, what the pros and cons are. Can you get us in contact with some people to help us evaluate or maybe get some incentives to go locate in their province? So we do that every day. Last year, we had a delegation from one of the provinces go to the United States. They went to Michigan. They went to my hometown, Holland, Michigan. Obviously, there's a good Dutch contingent there because they knew Holland, Michigan. They knew West Michigan, some of the products and services that they were looking at. They said, West Michigan would be a great place for us to strengthen some ties with American businesses. We then went across the state to Dow because Dow has some facilities in this province, and they wanted to strengthen that relationship by getting to know the CEO and some of the people personally. So we are. Our job here is to build the national security and law enforcement connections between the United States and the Netherlands, to build economic ties between us and the Netherlands going both ways. And then thirdly, the cultural heritage ties between the 2 countries. And so, those are our 3 top priorities.
So a person or a company trying to find out if its product or service would have customers in Holland would contact the Select USA portal through the State Department or through the Commerce Department, and also go through the state's economic development.
Yeah, they could. They could, if there's a Dutch company looking and saying, hey, we've got some ideas that we'd like to explore to see whether there is a market in the United States, we would help them. We would help connect them with people that we think could help them get to the right answer. Obviously, there's going to be deals that you look at it and say, wow, this is a great, you're not only doing well in Europe, but you can do well in the U.S. But the Dutch, it's a small country, so a lot of times, and they're very entrepreneurial. In 2019, the State Department runs what is called the Global Entrepreneurial Summit, and in 2019 we co-hosted it with the Dutch here in The Hague. And a lot of times, the people that are actually looking at opportunities in the United States, they'll launch their new products in the United States rather than in the Netherlands, because we're a bigger market than what the Netherlands is, and for them, in some ways, we are a bigger market than what Europe is, even though from a population standpoint, Europe's bigger. From a GDP standpoint, Europe is bigger, but you've got 26 different languages. So launching into the United States for them is easier. We also do a lot of work with the Consumer Technology Association as one of the, they've kind of selected Amsterdam and Paris as their gateways into Europe. So they run the Consumer Electronics Show every year in Vegas. And but for their landing pad here in Europe, they've chosen Amsterdam. So we work very closely with the Consumer Technology Association, which runs the Consumer Electronics Show, which they don't want it called that anymore. They just wanted it called CES in Vegas, which I don't know, attracts a couple 100,000 people to Vegas for about a week every January, canceled this year. We work at a number of different levels to do that. And then, so those are, that's specific. I'll tell you another one that we just, we got it done this week. We got it done we got it done on Friday, but we can tell people about it this week. The travel corridors between the U.S. and the Dutch, they've been shut down. The United States opened up a travel corridor from the Netherlands to the United States for business people back in July. So you could apply to the State Department, you could apply to the embassy, our consulate in Amsterdam, and if you could present a compelling business case, we would give you a special visa to go to the United States and conduct your business. But American businesses weren't able to do that coming to the Netherlands, and we are the largest foreign direct investor in the Netherlands. So for the last 2 months, we've been lobbying, petitioning, begging the Netherlands to create a business portal for American businesses to come to the Netherlands and take a look at their businesses, manage it, through COVID and all of those kinds of things. And this past Friday, the cabinet made the decision that they were going to open a travel link between Europe and the Netherlands, and American business people would then have the same opportunity. Contact the embassy in the Dutch embassy in Washington, give them the particulars, fill out the information, and so beginning on September 21, American businesses will now be able to start coming to the Netherlands to take a look at their investments, and potentially, like this one company that I've been talking to about locating in the Netherlands, they'll now actually be able to come here and meet face to face with the local officials and national government officials that allow the Dutch to make their case about, here's why you need to come to the Netherlands.
If you were to take a look at the overall U.S.-EU trade relationship, the bilateral trade that goes on between the U.S. and the countries of the EU, what do you see as any hindrances, aside from COVID-19, which is making life pretty difficult everywhere?
Well, the first thing is it's our strongest trading partner. Okay, you've got North America, but when you look outside of North America, our trade and commerce with the EU is the most important trading relationship that we have. The barriers that we have are, we could make it stronger, and we want to make it stronger. The president has, in some ways, he's been badgering the EU and saying, hey, we want the same access to Europe that we give to your companies coming into the United States. Let's level the playing field. And that's important so that we can strengthen this trade relationship, and that we can then use that our trading relationship to establish our norms in terms of protection of intellectual property, financial transparency, rule of law, and all of those kinds of things to some of our other trading partners, i.e., did I say China? Back in 2000, 2001, Don, you and I had the opportunity to vote on the issue of permanent normal trade relations for China. I voted no. I didn't believe China played by the rules. There were others who voted yes. They said, Pete, you're wrong. Allowing the Chinese into the World Trade Organization means that the more that we engage with them, the more that they become interlinked through trade and commerce, they will start moving towards, and the WTO will pressure and move them and evolve them to where they start to accept our norms. And they open up the Chinese market, they respect intellectual property and those kinds of things. Well, what we've now seen over 20 years, that hasn't happened. And so what the United States and Europe can do if we come together and strengthen our trade relationship is we can start putting more pressure on the Chinese to start abiding by international norms. That's the objective. That's what we want to do. We want to trade. We want to interact with China, but we want to interact with China on a level playing field.
The U.S. and the Europeans have had several barbs. One of them was the accountancy standards, which eventually got resolved. There was nothing there, but it was enough that it hindered U.S. trading. But there's also an issue with the electrical code for technology and consumer products. That went on for years and years and years. It was looked upon as what's called a non-tariff barrier for U.S. products going to Europe. But the Europeans are not exactly the easiest people to deal with.
No, absolutely not. And this is why the president has been fairly stern in trying to lay out number one, we want, his message is very clear. We want to grow this relationship with Europe because we're 330, 340 million people. We by ourselves cannot bring about change with China. If we connect with Europe and their, I think it's 460 million people now, and then you've got the 80 million people in the UK, so it's 540. But if you put together the market capacity and power of North America, because we really we can include Canada and Mexico, along with the UK and the EU, we have enough significant mass to bring about a serious negotiation with China about change. And some of the things that you just laid out, they have put in place some barriers to strengthening that trade relationship with the United States, and that is what we right now are working on, pretty much every day. Next week, we've got a meeting of some of us as European ambassadors. We're getting together, and I'm sure that trade will be one of the top items on there. We have some, Germany has some manufacturing tariffs that they like to keep in place to protect some of their industries. France has some tariffs in place that they'd like to protect some of their agricultural interest in. You talked about, some of these other non-tariff trade barriers, whether it's the electrical code, but it's really certification. America will accept certain products to be sold into the United States if they've been certified by European Union certification labs, okay? And if they're certified by these folks, we accept them. If we want to, in certain cases, ship stuff to the EU, there's not a reciprocal agreement. Our companies may have to get certified by UL or someone else. And if they want to sell in Europe, the UL listing or certification isn't valid. And I don't know about specifically UL, but a certification that might be viable and worthwhile and meaningful in the United States. If they want to sell into Europe, they've got to go through the European accreditation process. And so it's kind of like, let's reciprocate, guys, because bottom line is, most of the we don't sit here and take a look at the European standards and say, wow, these are third world standards, and they shouldn't look at our certification process and say, well, you're going to be producing third world products out of, if those are the standards you're using. We both have, similar types of standards, meeting certain very, very important criteria. A lot of times these standards are just written in different ways because of the bias of how the Europeans do this stuff versus how the US does it. But the bottom line is they're safe to use, and we should, but that's why we've been talking with the Europeans for quite some time, and we still haven't gotten to an agreement. But the bottom line is the US is serious about strengthening that relationship, improving the trade, and then leveraging it to influence other parts of the world.
Ron, did you have another question you wanted to ask the ambassador?
I have a question from a student. Recently, there's been a rise of human rights violations by Kremlin-related actors, most notably the attempt to kill a prominent Russian opposition politician. Since you served on the Intelligence Committee, could you share what is a general process in situations like this? Can the committee request a briefing from the intelligence agencies? And then more generally, what is the role of Congress as a foreign policy actor in situations like this?
Yeah, I would expect that if I don't follow exactly what days Congress has been in session, but this poisoning, as it's been identified in the press, both here in Europe and probably in the United States, I'm sure that the committee has had a hearing, okay, on this. They maybe requested it, or the intelligence community probably just said, I think Congress is going to be interested in this. And so, on the Intelligence Committee, you'll have at least a couple of briefings per week from the intelligence community. And I'm sure that the intelligence community came in one day and said, hey, we're going to give you an update on what we know about this recent activity of the poisoning of this dissident in Russia. I'm sure that the United States, through diplomatic means and through our intelligence communities and through law enforcement and scientific resources, we are, we're talking with the Germans, which is where this guy is. He's in Germany right now, and we're trying to figure out exactly what the right course of action is. It could be through the OPCW, which is located right here in The Hague, which is the organization on chemical weapons. What's that? Go ahead.
Organization for the Prevention of the Use of Chemical Weapons.
Okay, great. Organization for the Prevention of the Use of Chemical Weapons. I got close. And as to whether that is the organization that should properly investigate this. This is the organization that recently has just completed their investigation of serious use of chemical weapons and those kinds of things. So it may, this may move there, but so those are all the things that are floating around, and I'm assuming the Intelligence Committee is smack dab in the middle of this. You'll also then see that foreign policy, Congress has a role to do oversight. It has a role to advise, but Congress can't do foreign policy. The president, when he speaks, she speaks, they speak with one voice. They speak for the executive branch of the U.S. government. Congress, if it's, a senator who's chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee speaks, he speaks as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, but the ranking member can speak, any member of Congress can speak. It's really, really difficult for Congress to speak on foreign policy. Sometimes it's very helpful, Congress it's very helpful, especially when they speak with a bipartisan vote, bipartisan voice. So, there are Republicans and Democrats who agree that building this natural gas pipeline from Russia, bypassing Ukraine directly through, and then directly to Germany, and then to be spread over, much of Western Europe. When Congress in a bipartisan way says this is a bad idea, they're reinforcing the message of the president, of the administration. They're speaking in a unified voice. Europe really takes notice of this. Germany takes notice of it. The Dutch take notice of it because some of their contractors are helping to build this pipeline. Some of their banks are helping to finance this pipeline. And so when they see the president and Congress working, in unity on this, that's when I get the call. Hey, Pete, what's happening here? And do I have to worry about my company being sanctioned because of the work that we're doing on Nord Stream 2? Okay. So they can, but foreign policy is hard to conduct from Congress.
I wonder, could you provide your reaction to what's happening in the Middle East with the announcement of the normalizing of relations with Israel by the UAE and Bahrain?
Well, it's kind of like, wow. Okay. It's too early to say whether it's a game changer. But it's the first significant progress that has been made on the Israeli, Middle East peace process in a long time. And so, we're not exactly sure where this will evolve to, but there's a lot of people here who are watching it extremely closely. Because what it has done, it has separated the issue of the Palestinians from normalization of Israel, normalizing relationships with Israel by other Arab countries. And so I think potentially this has a huge positive impact in what happens in the Middle East. But let's hope and pray that's exactly the case, because and some of these countries have had a dialogue, they've had some trade with Israel, but they're now going to be able to get together on a more formal basis and have these discussions as they're building the economic relationships between them. They're of course going to start talking about national security issues and stability in the Middle East, and that may provide the opportunity for them to for some fresh approaches to take a look at how you resolve some of those festering issues with the Palestinians. So a great step forward, and let's see if we can't make the most of it. But again, it's dependent on the countries right there in the region, and it's great that we can help facilitate that they feel comfortable coming to the White House and signing those agreements, and allowing the United States to be a participant in that process. And let's hope there's more.
Congressman,
Well, I have a question, Pete. This is on a personal level. Frida and I had the opportunity to be with you and Diane there in The Hague for about 3 or 4 days. And we got in your van and traveled to, I think it was 2 cities in the Netherlands that were celebrating the 75th year of the liberation from the Nazis. And tell us about that. It was so moving.
Oh yeah, we were with that. We were just in that area on Sunday. Because they had their commemoration on Sunday. Again, this was not the town that we were in, but it was one that might have been 5 or 6 miles away from the one that you and I had the opportunity to present and lay down and lay a wreath. But they do it down, as you see, I think Diane and I, the week of Operation Market Garden last year, because that was the 75th anniversary of Market Garden, a bridge too far. We went to about 50 events in 8 days. Little town here, little town there, 100, 150 people. And then you go to Arnhem where Prince Charles was, and you've got 15, 20,000 people. But now it's the 76th. And so on Sunday, we were back there, and, under COVID restrictions and all that, the crowd was much smaller. But on Saturday, we went to a town in the southern part of the Netherlands where they were just commemorating, dedicating a new memorial to a plane that crashed in April. Think about it. April 1944. It was a B-24. It had 9 people, 9 Americans on it. We think it was probably the first mission for the pilot. First time that this crew had flown together. And they flew from the UK. They flew over the Netherlands. Part of the Netherlands was liberated. There was a small pocket that had not yet been liberated. The plane developed some problems, technical problems, so they never made it to Germany, never dropped their bombs, and they were flying. They were flying home, and they thought they were flying in an area that had been liberated, so it was safe. But they ended up flying over this narrow strip that was still controlled by the Nazis, and they were slowing down. Their plane was flying at much lower altitude, so they were a sitting duck. But they thought they were okay. But a German patrol boat opened up on them, shot them down. All 9 people were killed. A couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks later, maybe a kid in the neighborhood was playing near the crash site, found a grenade, pulled the pin, and killed himself. And so we were there, and they had just built this beautiful monument. It's a very special monument, and someday somebody's going to ride by there, and they're going to say, "I wonder what that is," and they're going to stop, and they're going to see that this community put up a phenomenal monument to commemorate 9 Americans who had died. And,
Well, what Frida and I thought was quite interesting is that we were in one of those small towns, and obviously there were a lot of there was a lot of American equipment left behind.
Yeah.
So you had the Dutch that were driving old American tanks, jeeps, bicycles, World War II bicycles, reenacting the American liberators.
Yep.
To their village. And I think what Frida and I were really encouraged is the fact is that at least the people in the Netherlands have never forgotten the sacrifice.
No.
The Americans.
And if you see what they do at Margrot in the American Cemetery, where we have 8,200 graves, and then we have about another 1,800 missing in action, commemorated on a wall, so slightly over 10,000 Americans. We will be there. We'll be there this coming Sunday for a liberation concert. Normally, we would have about 2,500 people there. Because of COVID, they'll do 2 concerts this year with 700 people. Last year, we laid wreaths across America, and we laid a wreath at every single grave. So 8,200 graves. The Dutch came out and helped volunteer, and I was down there, and we're thinking, I wonder how long it'll take to lay 8,200 wreaths, one by every grave. 20 minutes. That's all. There were that many Dutch people who came out to help lay the wreaths, and in 20 minutes we had them all laid, and then a little while after that, of course, they have to be picked up, and you say, well, that's not very glamorous. How long is that going to take? An hour. So the Dutch, they just come. They're absolutely phenomenal in remembering. They teach their kids about what happened in World War II. People have a lot of this mementos they've stored in they've kept them in their homes for years, but they're now starting to turn it into Dutch authorities and to people who are building museums. Last fall, Diane and I were at a brand new museum where it started off. The guy's a farmer.
We were there with you.
Yeah, that's right. You were there. He had a shed. His shed got full, so he built a bigger building. That building got full. He collected more, and all of a sudden, 20 years later, he's opening this big, beautiful museum with Sherman tanks and everything else. So now it's awesome what they do.
Ambassador, I have another question from a student in the class. In light of your involvement in intelligence and background in the intelligence community, what's your opinion on Edward Snowden and his disclosures of classified information regarding NSA intelligence programs? Seems that the public.
Number one, you can go to, within the intelligence community, they have whistleblowers. He could have gone there. The second thing is he could have gone after that if that had not worked out. There's a whole procedure laid out in law as to what he needs to do. The second thing he could have done is he could have gone if the first avenue were blocked and he didn't get satisfaction. He can then go to the intelligence committees where he can bring forward the information because really the information he has, you're whistleblowing on the intelligence community doing things that the overseers don't know about. That's what a whistleblower is about, right? You're whistleblowing on something that, hey, I know something that they're doing. I don't think it's kosher, and so I'm going to go complain to people, who probably don't know about this. But the things that he did, I don't believe there's anything that he said that we on the Intelligence Committee were not aware of, and we had approved of. He could have disagreed with the policies and those kinds of things. That he can do that. But as an employee in the intelligence community, if you're doing something that you maybe just don't agree with, you can't have an intelligence community where then it says, oh, I'm going to go run off to the media. So you can't do that. There are, so I'm a strong supporter of whistleblowers, but there's a whistleblower process that is identified that Republicans and Democrats have all agreed. This is the process, and this is how it works. Because otherwise you're going to have an Edward Snowden running off to the media just saying, I don't like this program. Without ever having gone to Congress trying to figure out, hey, Congress, do you guys know about this? Have you reviewed it? Do you guys agree with it? If you do, what's your legal justification for doing something that, quote unquote, I think is unlawful? So no, I think that my preference back when I was in Congress, I probably can't take a position on this as an ambassador, but my position when I was in Congress and before I became an ambassador was to prosecute him to the full extent of the law.
My last question, as someone from Michigan, that you are a Spartan or a Wolverine?
Oh, there's no question there. There's only one University of Michigan. There's only one university for Michigan. That's the
He got his MBA there.
Go Maize and Blue, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your taking time out of your day. And I know it's late there, but this was really helpful and informative, and it was great to talk with you.
Well, hey, thanks for allowing me to be the kickoff for your program. We were looking at the agenda and the folks that you've got coming in. It looks like you've got a great group of people coming in, and hopefully I haven't bored your students and other people who might listen and say, well, Kai, if that's what the other ones are going to be like, we're not going to listen in. But we hope that we provided some useful information and insights so that you will have a very, very successful program this fall. And again, I'm not sure I've ever been interviewed through computer by somebody wearing a, as they call it here, a Mundkap, a mouth cap. But thank you for keeping me safe.
Thank you.
But Pete, thank you so much. You've provided a glimpse of a U.S. ambassador, and most of the students have probably never met one. And you've given some real life examples of what an ambassador does. You've also done something that we did not anticipate would come out of this, is in showing the appreciation that the Dutch have for American blood. That's a remarkable story, not only of the Americans who shed their blood, along with a lot of Canadians and I think New Zealanders and Australians that were involved in the liberation, but the continuous appreciation that the Dutch have for the Americans, and the fact that they never want to let their children forget about that.
Yep.
That's remarkable.
Exactly right.
Thank you for that.
Great. Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
You bet. All right. Hey, goodbye.